Hi everybody, I'm Charles, and for those of you who might have come to this video from the Proust videos, I want to start by saying this is not meant to be any kind of overview of French 19th century literature. It's almost a coincidence. It started because I was interested in watching the MGM adaptation of Madame Bovary, and having made that commitment, I thought, well, I really should read the book first. So I read the book, and so I thought I'd offer some opinions of the book. This is not about the movie. If you're interested in what I have to say about the movie, you can look at the review online. I'll put the URL in the description field. Now, this is really one man's opinion, and I don't pretend to be an expert. So let's just dive into the world of Gustave Flaubert and Madame Bovary. Flaubert is credited with being one of the pioneers of capital R realist writing. But what does that mean? To answer that question, we must first recognize that realism is a style, just like Romanticism or Classicism or Cubism. It attempts to portray life as it is in a supposed absence of style. However, this stylist style is not just like life, although it aspires to appear so in our experience. It is a product of mid-19th century scientific impulse, and like science, attempts an objective approach shorn of moralism, engaging action, or escapist fantasy. In realist literature and drama, character and psychology dictate action, unlike the classical model, in which character is revealed by action. At the risk of a paradox that most realists would not acknowledge, it is an objective style about subjectivity. In Madame Bovary, Flaubert focuses on two phenomena of everyday life. He roots Emma's problems in her exposure to romantic idealist fiction, which gives her an unrealistic expectation from life and love. This psychological formation shapes her subsequent choices. This focus is compounded by Flaubert's notorious hatred of the bourgeoisie, a hatred which itself is very much a product of his times. The publication of Madame Bovary was roughly contemporaneous with the Communist Manifesto of Marx and Engels, for example. Not that Flaubert was a Marxist. He was a perfectionist, however, and as a result, published very little. He is often cited as an early example of the modernist literary model, not for his perfectionism as such, but because he was obsessed with the qualities of style and language, resulting in limited output. Madame Bovary took 5 years to write, for example. In effect, he obsessively focused on style in order to make it disappear. Emma's story is constructed to demonstrate that women's life choices reduce to wife, mother, or maybe a whore. She is too intelligent and imaginative to be happy with those limitations, and so seeks solace in the idealized lives and loves of romantic fiction. This immersion produces unrealistic expectations from marriage and motherhood, and so she seeks alternatives to her dull life with lovers she views as superior to her faithful but mediocre husband Charles. That escape also proves insufficient, and to fill the tedium of her daily routine, she indulges in luxuries. Those create the illusion of a richer life through her surroundings, but at the expense of deepening debts. This economic focus of the story ties in with Flaubert's anti-bourgeois sentiments and, by extension, a critique of capitalism, or at least consumerism. Emma pursues things as a way of overcoming her disappointments with men and life, but doing so not only fails to satisfy her emotionally, it eventually leads to ruin. She indulges in this excess with the encouragement of the town milliner Lheureux, who caters to Emma's ever greater extravagance by advancing her funds at usurious rates. While Lheureux can be seen as a nearly Simon Legree-like villain, he makes an interesting comparison beside another character, Homais, the village apothecary, whose scientific interests, while superficial, prove equally disastrous. In other words, the two characters who represent the most progressive of mid-19th century social development, science, and capital, are to some extent depicted as the cause of Emma's undoing. This critique may or may not be deliberate, but it hints at why the book alternates between sympathy and criticism. Emma is sympathetic to the extent she is a victim of her time and society, but she is also responsible for her demise and thus unattractive. A bankrupt adulteress, an uncaring mother, your sympathy with her extends only so far as you believe she has no alternatives. Flaubert's objectivity, in other words, tends towards an acceptance of things as they are, as a bleak landscape of competing social pathologies in which all are buffeted by forces beyond individual control. Secondary characters verge on satire, and the ending is particularly cold. Charles dies ruined and alone. Their daughter Berthe is penniless and reduced to virtual slave labor in a factory. On the other hand, Homais the Fool eventually receives the Légion d'honneur. Flaubert would no doubt insist he was just following the logic of a situation greater than the fate of individual characters. One can be convinced by his critique, but still wonder what he values in contrast beyond his stylistic perfection. What is his alternative to the developing capitalist world? The answer might seem to be the artistic perfectionism with which the story is told, or, to anticipate how such attitudes would develop in subsequent decades, the aristocracy of culture and talent demonstrated by superior expression. To quote the Wikipedia entry, in Flaubert's correspondence, he intimates that he was never satisfied with what he had composed, explaining correct prose did not flow out of him and that his style was achieved through work and revision. I can sympathize with that goal, discipline, and self-criticism as method. I am not so sure about the results, however. From what little I've read of Flaubert's work, admittedly in translation, his perfect prose is rather cold and cheerless. It is not just that the story provides no easy identification. He seems to demonstrate that squeezing out all the imperfections like water from a sponge leaves nothing but a dry husk.